I deal with comparison by first accepting it because it's a natural human emotion, and second, asking myself what this comparison is telling me. By reminding myself, hey, that's not quite in alignment with who I want to be, that comparison, while it can still sit there, is no longer overwhelming me.
Another edition of Living Boldly with Purpose, and I'm Dr. B. I'm your host today. And just thinking about the excitement of being able to move forward in purpose. And sometimes when we think about purpose, we think that somehow we're just going to have this aha moment all of a sudden, and then we're in purpose. And what I'll tell you is, for a lot of us, and I think Aaron can contest this, he's our guest today, I'll introduce him in a second, but contest that you have to do some things, try some things, see if you love some things before it becomes your purpose. It's not like you wake up one day and go, okay, this is what God wants me to do. It is, it is a series of trials and errors, and then increasing and enhancing those trials, the things that you really like doing, you keep doing a lot of. What I love to tell people is when you truly know you're in purpose, that you probably would be willing to do it for free. Now, wait a minute. I'm not saying you need to do it for free. And I'm not saying that you can't make a tremendous amount of money doing your purpose, but the willingness to say, if I could just wake up every morning, money was no object, this is what I would do. And Aaron, maybe you can test this as well, is I've yet to find the person who is living in their purpose who is not serving others. And I've actually been trying to find, I had one guest that was kind of there. We said, I want to be the most selfish man on the planet. And, I don't care about serving others. But then he was doing things that were serving others. So it was like, you might say that, and that might be in your head unless you're just trying to take advantage of others. But I don't know of a way that you could live in purpose, do what God put you on this earth to do, and not serve others. And so when you think about that and you're designing it and you're building your life around the things that you would love to do, because I think sometimes we get stuck in doing what somebody else wanted us to do instead of what we love to do. And so when you're trying to find that and moving into it and finding ways, whether it's somebody who's a missionary on another, continent, or it's somebody here who's building micro trips that are enhancing somebody who's handicapped, or whatever it is, that you're serving others in a way that you can. And so today, as we talk to Aaron, is no exception. As he's doing leadership and coaching and helping find people, helping people find their path to I guess when you think about happiness, and I don't want to just say like, you think of the movie, the happiness movie. What was it? I can't think of the name of it. Pursuit of Happiness. I don't know if, our goal in life is to be true, just say, I'm happy now, so my life is fulfilled. I think there's something more to it that is when you're in purpose, is the joy you get from it, is the fulfillment that goes beyond just being happy. It is, I woke up this morning and I can't wait to wake up to go do the things that I was put on this earth to do. And so exactly. So finding that is truly when you get to that point. And so, Aaron, I'd love for you, as we chop it up and talk about some of those things later, I would love to hear your story. And sometimes, when you get on podcasts and people say, well, give us your bio. And we, some folks, even me included, sometimes we're all just say, well, here's what I do. But I don't really get to talk about who I am. And so I hope you'll take the time today to talk about, how you were brought up. But, I think people get so much into, man, that guy's just like I was, and he's able to do this. And, and so let's chop that up and go ahead and tell your story. Start from when, you can start your mama's womb or somewhere in between. We'll go up to now, and then we'll really kind of talk about purpose and what you're doing in life. So,
Absolutely. Well, first off, Dr. B, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm happy to share my story. Funny enough, I do a lot of speeches for different conferences, and I always have my bio read, and they talk about my education, my master's degree in IO
mhm,
psychology, what I do for a living, and they might put a snippet of a hobby or something. But
mhm.
just like you said, that doesn't tell you, it tells you what I do, it doesn't tell you who I am. So, absolutely. And I'm excited to get into some of those topics, talking about happiness and purpose and the work, because I've got so much to say about that. So you kind of whet my palate, and now we're gonna go into story mode, and then we come back to that. So it's very exciting. But yeah, as far as my story goes, the first thing I always say is you got to know about two major things about me. First off is that I was homeschooled, and from kindergarten until I left for college, and that was due to my parents, who I'm very grateful for, going through poverty and a lot of change and a lot of instability to give their children, me and my brothers, a better life. And that homeschooling, it's, I want to be very clear, there's a lot of love in my home. Uh, in exchange with that, it's not a yes, but it's a yes and.
Mhm.
I had what was stereotypically called a tiger mom, which I know in some cases is not PC and others is. It's just the simplest way for me to describe it is there was a lot of strictness. As an Asian household, I am a Filipino, and so I had this grading system growing up, which was A, B, or F, and so anything less than 80% was considered a failure. And so that concept of, okay, do it right the first time so you don't have to waste effort. Do it right the first time so you can, doing all this effort and making sure you get it right. Well, there was this mentality that sunk into a young child of, okay, what's the right answer? How do I do it right so I don't get, in trouble or punished or have to do it again, because it was stressed so much that essentially imperfection was not what we were striving for. We wanted perfection in this, or
Mhm.
at least the correct answer. And so the second thing you need to know about me is I believe it was 2023 that I was officially diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And so I was an autistic homeschool child. So there was a lot of awkwardness, a lot of social hurdles, and a lot of rigid thinking. So when you have the idea of what's the first right answer, how can I get this right the first time, all this like preemptive kind of anxiety around anything, any answer, any problem, any person. Whenever I had to meet in a group, I always felt such anxiety because I said, well, I'm one way with this person and one way with another. And I felt so I felt so in tune with being a chameleon that I kind of lost my initial sense of self, growing up in that type of environment. And I'm sure a lot of individuals with neurodivergence or multiple identities,
Mhm.
because being Filipino, I'm half, my mother's side is Filipino, my dad's side is white. And so I'm Asian American. However, Filipino colonized by Spain also means I'm Hispanic, but not Latino. And then also, culturally, they're more of a Pacific Islander because it's kind of an country, and so there's all these identities that are fighting within me, and that was
Mhm.
a lot of my growth, honestly. But those are the two things that really tell you the most about who I am. And I know we're going to dive into purpose and some of the questions that you allowed me to get a snippet of. Some of those are like, why do you do what you do? And honestly, if I were to tell you who I was without telling you my job, my hobbies, or any identifying factors, I would say I am a lonely little boy who's seeking connection. That's it. That's how I could be summed up in one word, one sentence, is I am always seeking connection. And as you talked about serving others, I mean, I think once you kind of get over yourself, for lack of a better word, right? Once you do the inner work and the healing and you start to see the pieces of yourself that are preventing you from connecting with others, and you start to push through that growth and unpack that shame of, oh man, I'm not allowed to be wrong, essentially was my dysfunctional belief in the past. I wasn't allowed to be imperfect. I wasn't allowed to be any of these things. Once I unpacked that and I said, you know what? I like being a goofy little guy and sometimes I make mistakes. Then when I found that, I was able to have much more deep connections, and I kind of went outside of myself, and now I serve others because it's almost like once you find that inner peace, it doesn't matter. It's not about me. I still
Mhm.
have egotistical moments. I won't lie. There's still moods, right? But you talked about that pursuit of happiness. Like if you're happy all the time, there's no sadness. You don't know that you're happy. You're content. You're comfortable. You're not going to be growing past that. You have to have ups and downs. I actually have a picture of a heart rate monitor on my mission, vision, and value statements, which we'll talk about later. But it's to signal that life has to have ups and downs, or else you're not going to have the contrast of, oh, I'm happy because I was sad yesterday, or I'm sad right now, and that's okay because this depth of sadness tells me something about myself and
Yeah.
helps me to find my joy later on, or something similar. Obviously, not speaking in instances of extremity like extreme manic episodes or very, very sad depression. Like, obviously, hey, get some help for those. But, in the moments of I, as a human being, am allowed to feel the range of human emotions, then that's where you really find that purpose is in the depth of exploring all of your individual facets of humanity. And once you find that, that's when you start to serve others because you say, it doesn't matter about me. We're all connected. I have all my needs met, but I have the capacity to do more. It's kind of like when you have one child and then you decide to have a second. It's like
Mhm.
when you have that first kid, right? It's a nightmare because you're like, wait, am I going to be a good dad? How is all the structures, all the home changing, finances changes, all the considerations? Is the house baby proof? All these different things. And then you get into a rhythm and you grow the capacity and you say, you know what? I'm a good dad, or I'm doing well with this child, and then they become 2 years old or something. You say, let's have another, and now you get to explore new dynamics. And that's, I think, where serving others comes in the sense of I've grown enough as my individual self, and I am getting my needs met, and now I serve others through basically showing them the same journey. And speaking about myself here, I went through coaching for, I've been interested in this journey for about 14, 15 years. I mean, since I was like 13, I was picking up psychology books, trying to understand other people because that was my interest. And so coming to a place where I can do what I would do for free, but I appreciate that I get paid for it, right? Getting to a place of that is what I would call purpose. Absolutely.
Wow. So thank you for sharing that because it brings a whole lot of stuff that I would love to unpack. When I think about you and you're growing up and as we try to shape our identity, right? Who
Mhm.
we are. And I love that you said, hey, I'm a lonely child seeking connection.
Absolutely.
And thinking about our identity is shaped by those connections that we make. And it sounds like your mom kind of hovered, made sure you were doing the things that she wanted for you, which in your best interest that she thought and did the best that she was going to do.
Absolutely.
But how do you think your identity has been shaped not only by that experience with mom growing up, but by the other connections you've made since then to become the man that you are today? What are some of those things that have happened?
The thing that comes up is every relationship is a mirror.
Okay.
Every relationship is showing you something about yourself. And in the instance of like my mother, yeah, growing up as a child, I felt squashed by over almost over loving, over um, worrying and stuff like that. Is those that was her love language, is how she showed love. And funny enough, it's how I show a lot of care to my friends is, hey, let me know when you get home safe, right? I care about you so much, so tell me things. And it can come off overbearing sometimes, and that's just the person, right? And we can't we can't affect how others perceive us, but we can continue to have that feedback loop. And I think as you talk to you ask a question of what relationships kind of helped me, honestly, all of them. There's a lot of situations where I was as authentic and quote unquote me as possible, and I caused harm. And I reflect on that and I'd be better. Or ways where I wasn't sure if this was entirely an aspect of who I wanted to be. Like, for instance, I'm a big like theater kid, and I fought that for a long time because my brother is very artistic. He was the one who built model ships, and he sews all these amazing dresses and fashion and cosplays, and he can paint and do things on canvas, digital art. He's so creative, and I just never saw myself as that. And so it took a large, I guess, pushing through an internal wall of I'm not artistic, I am not creative, and then changing that narrative within myself because I was comparing who I had to be compared to him versus I'm allowed to be creative too. I'm a human being just like him. And so through that, I explore situations like I love the Renaissance fair and dress up and knight's armor, and I have a 3D printer now for all these funky little gadgets and trinkets. And I love going out to like raves and festivals. And yet at the same time, as we talk about identity, those are pieces that are rather extreme instances of creativity. They're kind of like you're going and getting in a stage on the world, essentially, in the Renaissance fair. Now it's hard to bring those pieces into like a workspace. When I'm coaching somebody, I am more silent. I am more like I'm less loud because I'm listening. You know, in our instance here, back and forth, when you speak, I don't want to talk over you. It's a podcast. I want the listeners to have a wonderful experience. And then also, I want us to have a wonderful civil discussion. And so I won't come here and say, oh, well, let me show you this thing. And then let me show you my plants over here. And let me show you this, because then it's all about me, me, me. Right. And so accepting that there are different pieces of yourself that have different, I suppose, buckets or scenarios or environments for them to really spread their wings, like individual parts of you, is something that I really learned through all my relationships. Because, like I said, every relationship is a mirror. So no matter what piece of me was coming out, I was seeing from some places, okay, you're being a little too goofy here. Maybe let's not crack a joke when somebody's crying, right? You know, obviously giving an extreme example. But then
Yeah.
the other, but in some cases, some friends, they want you to make them laugh as a distraction from their tears, right? And so it's thinking, okay, who do I want to show up as right now in this moment? And so to cap all that off, I didn't directly answer your question, but I hope I gave a broad enough
Oh,
answer.
you really did. Yeah, no,
Everybody.
yeah, you did a good job of, because for some people it's an event, or it's a person, or it's a coach or something like that that was the pivotal moment that helped shape the identity. And obviously, our identity is shaped by all of our experiences,
Mhm.
that go in. But I love the way that you couch it, even that where you were talking about your brother and being artistic. And I think we can be good at a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that that's what our purpose is, or that's where we need to grow
Absolutely.
through. And I think it took me a long time to come to grips with some of that as well. I was a computer teacher, right? I taught, um, uh, I guess, educational technology. So I taught teachers how to use, at the university back way in the 90s, how to use, computers and stuff in their classrooms. And this is, even before the internet, when the internet kind of came on, why I was teaching my classes. But then I moved over to high school, and they wanted me to teach graphic design. And I'm not, my wife is incredible artistic and can draw. So I'm teaching graphic design, but that's really, I can do it because I'm using the tool of technology to do it. But I thought I was good enough to be, at least get kids through. Uh,
Mhm.
Now that I look back on it, I probably did a disservice because I wasn't able to give them some of those creative tools that they may have need to expand who they are. But I really realized that this was not something that I needed to pursue when my son, and so this is how many years it took. My son graduates college, goes, and now he works for Pixar, and I see
Wow.
something that he's drawn on the screen, and I'm going, "Oh, that's art. That's that." So I say, "Well, I'm an incredible graphic designer through my son." So
That's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah.
my DNA's in him, right? So that's how I was able to figure it out. But when you think about, you know, so many of us try, like you said, compare,
Mhm.
and comparison can be that one thing that just takes you back so far. When you're trying to compare yourself to what somebody else has done or what somebody else is doing, instead of maybe following them or learning from them or growing from them. How did you fight? Because you have brothers and sisters, you have people that you saw, people have come in, fight that comparison thing that we all do that kind of sets us back.
100%. And I guess my answer to that is honestly, I don't. I don't fight the comparison.
Okay.
That's the main thing is everybody uses that word fight, but you
Uh-huh.
take a moment to think about what does fight like what does that make you feel when you think about that word? It comes to instances of conflict and big battles and arguments and yelling. And it's like, why are you doing that internally? Why are you fighting a piece of yourself? If I sit there and I say, man, I'm kind of jealous of, let's say I'm going to the gym, right? And I see this guy who's twice as big, lifting twice as much. And I go, man, I'm not lifting that. And it's very easy to sink into this feeling of, well, because I'm not that big or I'm not perfect. Again, there's that mentality of I got to be in the top 20%, right? 80% or less is failure, was that belief that I held for so long. And it still comes up, that comparison. The moment you fight it, that's where you're shaking a pop or soda can and you're having it bubble up and then it has to burst out. That's what happens when you fight your emotions. And this goes for every single emotion. If you're feeling anger, anger tells you that a boundary of yours is being crossed, that you're feeling that something is not meant for you. Okay, I'm angry because I feel an injustice. I'm angry because somebody treated me in a way that makes me feel bad, and sadness shows you the things in your life that are not aligned with you, or sadness for instances of grief or things like that. Sadness shows me, hey, I'm really hurt that this happened, and it again is a mirror, because every relationship, including the relationship with yourself, is a mirror. And so I deal with comparison by first accepting it because it's a natural human emotion, and second, asking myself what this comparison is telling me. So if I'm looking at this guy who's twice as big and twice as strong, I'm like, ugh, I'm feeling a little like less of a man. And I go, okay, what's that telling me about what manliness looks like to me? Is it just the biggest, loudest, buffest guy in the room? Ugh, that doesn't sound great. When I think of what does manliness mean to me, and I think, well, we talk about being a protector. I say we always think like a physical protector, and that's where that's being triggered in that moment of comparison. And so I'll sit and remind myself, Aaron, your definition of manliness of being a protector is about emotional protection. Like if I'm not a safe space for people, I'm not protecting anybody. So I want to be an emotional protector. And so by reminding myself, hey, that's not quite in alignment with who I want to be, that comparison, while it can still sit there, is no longer overwhelming me. So it's almost like it triggers a response and a reminder of, hey, what are my ideals right here? Am I sticking to my guns? Am I being true to myself? And in that moment, no, because I'm looking at that guy and letting his existence invalidate mine. And I'm like, no, that's not right. That's dishonoring myself. And so comparison also in artistic situations, like I love poetry. I'm not great with picture drawing and things like that, like my brother. He's more of that artist side, and that's fine because I'm a poet and my brother is not a poet. And so we're both creative in different ways. And then in that comparison, I say, you know what, I can still make a pretty cool stick figure if I want to. I don't feel like it, but that's okay. If I want to make a really fancy stick figure, I can do that, and that's still art. It's just not how I personally leave creativity in the world. And I say, I'm going to turn that stick figure, whether that feeling is, I'm going to turn it into words. Maybe I'll make it a sentence and I'll articulate how I'm feeling. And then for others, that might trigger comparison. And then it just gives you that prompt of, hey, maybe you're not a poet and that's okay. Maybe you're not an artist and that's okay. If you feel bad that you're not able to do this, explore internally. What is that feeling telling you? Because the feeling bad does not mean that you are bad. It means that your internal heart, your higher purpose is calling you to be introspective whenever you feel that sense of comparison.
I want to go deeper into this because
Absolutely, let's do it.
I'm so intrigued about the how, and because you're saying things that are hitting home, that okay, comparison is there, it's part of life, it's part of what we're going to do. And then you say, well, I'm telling myself this is the person I'm comparing. But how do you do that? Is that like, I guess when I'm thinking, like, are you just thinking in your mind and you built this muscle so you can quickly see that, compare yourself, do that interaction? Or are you writing this down? Did that process of learning how to do this take a long time? Because I think it's so introspective that it's neat that you can do that. You can, I can watch a movie and say, okay, I see that this actor is, doing this thing, or even though it's pretend, right? We kind of, align ourselves with characters that we want to compare
Absolutely, you
ourselves
do.
to a character that doesn't even exist, that we do that all the time. I guess my favorite was like Jack Bauer in 24. I would love to be this, like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but he's yeah, just does stupid stuff, right? In order to save the world every 5 minutes. But you say, well, I want to identify with that. I want to compare myself to that. Or, it's the neighbor across the street whose yard is much nicer than my yard. But how do you go through this process of learning how to take it sounds like you're removing yourself from yourself in order to do the comparison and then put yourself back in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's why
In a way, yeah, that's a good way to think about it. So it kind of ties into what we do in coaching. So there are many different ways, but the core of any sort of growth, whether it's therapy, coaching, personal training, like anything like that, it is about tuning into yourself. It's
Mhm.
about setting a goal, being realistic with yourself of where am I at and where do I want to go? And then where are the hurdles? How am I going to get there? So I liken what I do to personal training, but for the heart. If I talk with you, I say I'm not a therapist, I'm an executive coach. And, in some cases, a life coach, I talk with people individually because a lot of it blends over. If you're going to be a leader, you have to be solid in who you are as a person before, not before, but in order to be the most effective leader of others. It reminds me of, I mentioned I love cosplay, things like that. I recently threw on an outfit for Jon Snow, and so I'm going to pull something from Game of Thrones. So there's a scene where Jon Snow's trying to like lead or something like that, and the Lord Commander comes up and puts him to the side and says, "Hey, do you want to be a leader one day?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I do." And he goes, "Then you have to learn how to follow." you know and so in the instance of finding your authenticity, finding your purpose, you have to follow your heart is guiding you. The quiet moments right before bed, sometimes like early in the morning, or just moments where you're very, very quiet. For me, it's a lot of times in the shower where it's just a droning sound and I can just sit with my thoughts. I am guilty of taking long showers because I like to be introspective, right? And so you sit here and you just hear what comes up. Sometimes it's something that's wild out of nowhere, like, I think I want to take a trip somewhere. Sometimes it's a truth you've been avoiding, which is, man, I'm taking a shower in the morning and I have to go see so and so later today. And I always feel so drained when I hang out with them. And you just sit there and, like, why am I hanging out with them? And that's a piece of that's aligning yourself. And so through coaching, regardless of what the tool is, a lot of times it's writing. Sometimes it's verbalizing. So I am a verbal processor. So I actually, and I don't know if this is going to be internal or not, or visual. I think we have video with this as well, right?
Yeah, we-
Those who are like listening on like Spotify or something don't have video. So I'm pulling up a 3D printed skull that I have, like a Hamlet style. And I'll sit and I'll just monologue to this little thing every now and
Oh,
then.
nice.
Here's what my day's going like. What do you think? Because I feel like I'm talking to another person. And so I literally become a theater kid for a bit, Hamlet style, and just monologue. Here's how I'm feeling, and this is how great it is or bad it is, or here's how sad it is. And I sit there and I really make it theatric, like I'm a character in a play. And I say, now I take myself into the audience and think, wow, what are they trying to tell me with that? I had such a great day because of this, and this. And it's like, oh, that character likes this feeling or this direction or this crowd. I really like that character when they're that. And that's me telling myself, I like myself when I hang out with these people. Or I really don't like it when this situation's happening. Or why am I comparing myself with that person? That's not my journey, you know? And so for actionable steps for people listening, some of the tools that are used are like journaling. Some is just quiet time, meditation, yoga. A lot of times we hear these as buzzwords of like, oh, it'll fix all your problems. Listen, it doesn't matter how you connect with yourself as long as you're making intentional time to connect with yourself. One of the ways I do so, processing my emotions, I will find a song that really like makes me cry or makes me feel exactly what I'm feeling, and I'll loop it for like an hour, two, three, and I'll just loop that same song until I feel like my emotion has had the proper outlet. Other times, I will get as a visual person, I will visualize a younger version of myself and I'll talk to him. One of the biggest moments that I had was deciding if I wanted to move apartments. So it was about a year into living here where I was starting to become competent as a coach, and I had the funds to where I was living in a like kind of older building that was kind of a hill went downward, so it was in a shadowy area, brown carpets, built in the 70s, not the best insulation. And right next door, one street away, they were building like a third story building, brand new, and it was all the same rent. And I sat there and I'm like, I should be in that building. And I fought with myself of, Aaron, why are you not being like humble with the place that you're at? Why are you gonna spend twice the rent to break your lease and go to this new place? Like, it's just, isn't that arrogant of you? So I sat there and I fought with myself for probably 2 or 3 days. And I'm a person that makes decisions slow. And yet they said, hey, if you move in by April, which was like 3 weeks away, like 3 weeks to make this decision, I went, ooh, this is a big decision. Am I going to move all my stuff, etc.? And I was just in internal like analysis paralysis. So one day I was driving to the gym, and I have this image of my younger self, 5 years old, just sitting next to me in my passenger seat while I'm going to the gym. I'm just verbally venting to him. I'm like, I don't know if I deserve this. Like, I feel so arrogant. Am I really going to be the guy that goes into this like third floor penthouse? And, it was just another building. Like, it's not that fancy. But I was sitting there and kind of turning it into that, making it an extreme comparison of morality almost. And I imagine this younger version of myself just playing with a puzzle. And he just goes, I don't really get it, but I think everybody should be happy. So like just do whatever makes you happy. And I sit there and I go, oh, of course. And that was a moment of, you know what? Yeah, this would help. This would make me happy in the moment. This would be an environment that I love, and I'm still living there as of right now. So I have a beautiful view that I can take clients out on sometimes, just sit there with my laptop and talk to them while I look at the sunset or talk and enjoy the weather and enjoy the sunshine. And so it's something that has helped me evolve and be a better person, not through having the material thing, but through understanding that the experience that this would give me as a tool for being more aligned with myself was worth it. Now, to finally cap all this off as far as tools, one other tool that we use is my coaching, which is cognitive behavioral psychology. Now, I will not go too far into it. You can look it up if you'd like, or you can schedule a call with me off of LinkedIn or something and come have a chat with me, anybody listening. But what we do is we check this ABCD, which is there's an activating event, which is your A. Your B is your belief system. Your C is your consequent emotion. And your D is your dependent behavior. So to take you down an example real quick, A to D behavior, notice how I skipped B and C, is called reactivity. So for instance, let's say there's a snake. You and I are talking on this podcast. You look down, there's a snake in your studio. What you're going to do? You're going to kick it, scream, something like that, right? So that snake is your A, your activating event. And D is your dependent behavior, how you act with the snake. So that behavior is fight or flight. But since we've evolved as human beings, our fight or flight has also evolved. And so what we can do to tackle that is we look at, okay, start with you running away from the snake. Why? That goes to your C, your consequent emotion. I was scared. I was scared of the snake and it was, gonna harm me. I say, okay, so you're scared of the snake. Circle back, why? That gets you to your belief system. Now, if you remember with the comparison, I said the story I was telling myself, what I was telling myself, that's your B, that's your belief. So if your belief is every single snake in the world is dangerous and can kill me, absolutely, you're going to be scared and you're going to run away. But what if you have a pet snake? What if you have knowledge of snakes? Or what if the snake is halfway across the room and it's not as big a threat? Your belief system changes. And so that's a big part of my coaching, which is let's look at the belief system. In that belief, what are you telling yourself? If you say, I have to be the biggest, strongest, manliest guy in the room, I have to be the loudest, or else I'm not a man, well, that's a dysfunctional belief. Let's tackle that. Because I love to cry and I'm a sensitive man. I'm still a man, right? And so that idea of tackling that belief. So that is the tool that I use the most because that is in my coaching and I get to remind myself every day. But I still augment it because cognitive behavioral psychology is not for everybody. Some people it's cognitive. So some people want to get into their bodies, more somatic. Some people are more looking at energy, others visual, like me. I externalize things. So a little long-winded, but I hope that gives plenty of tools for all the listeners and yourself. Those are many different ways to tune into yourself. But to tackle that comparison and those feelings, tune into yourself. That is the message. Tune into yourself.
I love that. I wrote a book that's called There Is No Tiger, and it's about overcoming overthinking and controlling anxiety. And I have a chapter in that on cognitive behavioral therapy. So you're right. I mean, it's like you're talking to me, Ray.
I love that. Yeah.
And as I'm here, so you're like thinking, wow, how does he do some of this stuff? Because I'm thinking like at night when I'm not doing, I don't know if it's meditation or I was half asleep and something will come to me. And then I won't write it down, right? Because I want to sleep more. And so I want to jump up. I want to write it down, but so I start saying to myself over and over again, as if I'm going to remember, right? Whatever it is that I'm trying to do, like okay, I'll remember this in the morning. Then I wake up and I don't remember it. I'm so mad at
Yeah.
myself because I haven't figured out a tool. While I'm sleeping. I got tools while I'm walking. I got tools while I'm there. So I love, some of these things that it doesn't all have to be journaling, right? It doesn't all have to
Mhm.
be writing it down. It doesn't, however you're getting in touch with you. Talk to me a little bit about associations and the power of people that can influence you or move. Because we started getting into leadership, and I want to move into leadership. And I think of Maxwell saying, leadership is influence, nothing less, nothing more. I think about him saying, if you are a leader and you have nobody following you, you're only just taking a walk. And so I start thinking about the people that I'm around and what do I allow in my space,
Mhm.
because there's so many times when that, your family you can't do anything about, right? You got to hang out with your family. They're your family. You're going to do. I mean, I guess you could limit time with them, but I think some of us get into some of these relationships sometimes that really don't serve us, or we haven't figured out. And I think you're gonna help me here. How to
Yeah.
figure out how to be in that space with them, but not accept the things that they're saying. If
Mm.
maybe that's, or do we just, like, for me it's like, more like flight. I just need to get away from you for a while because, but when my wife is talking to me about stuff that's like crazy, I'm like, well, I can't get away from you. I can do, So yeah, talk to me about how do we find these great relationships that enhance our lives, but still be able to be in control of who we are.
Absolutely. So I think first off, kind of giving up the illusion of control because there's only so many things we can control.
I like
There's
this.
never going to be a perfect moment of control. And additionally, again, similar to that fight, right? The word control is, well, what are we controlling, right?
Yeah.
If you are seeking like inner peace, right, in the sense of, okay, things are not pulling me specifically towards chaos, which we consider out of control, right? That's the phrase we use for that. Then I would say seeking control in that situation is actually what are the things that I can influence? And that would be the question to ask yourself is how do we focus on the things that we can influence when we are in environments where they're not serving us? And part of it is acknowledging that the self-awareness to say, is this aligned with who I am? You know, talking about the ABCD, that cognitive behavioral psychology, the theory of adult development states that about 75% to 80% of people emotionally are still teenagers, which is not a diss on anybody. It's just simply we, in general, lack the tools to teach each other as people how to be adults. And what that looks like is if somebody cuts me off on the road, yes, I'm angry for 5 seconds. I go, oh man, you could have, hurt somebody, etc. Like I do feel the anger, but I'm not going to sit there and road rage with them. What I sit there and say is, okay, I'm angry because somebody just, anger again, serving me, saying somebody just overstepped their boundary and almost hurt you. So you're allowed to be angry. But how you act as a result is the adult, right? If I sat there and honked and followed them, that'd be a childish behavior, right? So I sit and I say, well, if 80% of the world is teenagers and toddlers, how would I handle this if it was a teenager that just cut me off? And I say, well, it sounds like they haven't learned how to share the road yet. I hope they do. It's like they haven't learned how to share. That sucks for them. I hope they learn, right? And so that's the idea of when you're in an environment, understanding that simultaneously the people you spend the most time around are going to influence you the most, and the people that you spend the most time around are going to influence you the most, both negative and positive, in the sense of, okay, I might have to limit my time with somebody because they're moving me in a direction that I don't want to be this person. If you're a baseball player and all your friends are soccer players and they keep inviting you to play soccer, that's awesome. You're probably going to turn into a soccer player. But if you're meant to be baseball, like, yeah, it'll help you with your running and your cardio and sportsmanship. Awesome. But if you really want to be a baseball player, go hang out with some baseball players because the soccer players can't tell you how to swing your bat or, the timing and positioning and stuff because they're using different environments. Doesn't mean you can't be friends with them. Go hang out, as a gym goer I've done bodybuilding and powerlifting, and I've moved into functional fitness. And so when you look at, I may not be able to lift the same amount anymore, but my body moves a little differently. And so understanding that I want to surround myself with people that might be doing more cardio centric, obstacle course racing is what I'm really into right now. But I do, you know, not regret, but I kind of miss the bodybuilding moments of like, oh yeah, let's all go lift and we're gonna do three, like just 30 minutes of hitting bench just to perfect our form. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I do miss that sometimes, right? But anyway, that's a slight tangent. So pulling it all the way back, um, the idea of being in an environment that doesn't serve you is first acknowledging that it doesn't serve you. When we talked about serving others, you can't give from an empty cup. We hear that all the time. So, what is the environment, and is it fueling your cup? Is this helping you be the person you want to be? If you're going out partying every weekend, that's fantastic if you want to value the fun and you do it in moderation. But if you're going out partying because you want to avoid the stress of, oh yeah, I worked a job I hate for 5 days, now I party for two, and I'm living for the 2 days, but oh no, I don't have finances to actually do anything I want to do. So like if that's the life you want, no shame, no judgment. However, I want you to take note of, is it sustainable and does it make you feel fulfilled? If the answer is yes, go for it. Absolutely. More power to you. If it doesn't, ask yourself, what would I rather be doing? And honestly, really think and then surround yourself with people that do the same. But understand first and foremost, when you are changing who you are, when you're growing into another person, when you're evolving and you're chasing after a different environment, know that if you are a baseball player trying to learn soccer and you want to go learn baseball, you're probably going to spend a lot of days alone in the batting cage working on your form, and you will not know what's right or wrong in the sense of what you're doing swinging your bat. But there will be somebody that goes to the batting cage and says, I see that you're swinging this bat like every single day. You must really love baseball. I love baseball too, but I actually work, I'm on a team. Can I talk to you about your form? Can we talk about that? And now you've made a friend that will help fuel your cup in that way to be that baseball player. I hope that analogy works for most people, but tell me your thoughts, Dr. B.
No, I love that because, yeah. Um, wow. I'm just thinking about the analogy and being able to get there. And yeah, you're right. I don't even know how much more I can add to that as I'm thinking about how do we make sure that we are in those right rooms, and then being able to acknowledge that it doesn't serve you. And I think that's where the maturity goes. I love talking about being a teenager. I'll be 60 years old in March, and so I'm thinking about all the things that I don't get angry about anymore.
Yeah.
All the things that I'm like, why would I spend my time being in that space? And I think I'm know enough about myself now that I don't have to, listen to some of the things that are being said or the rhetoric being said, or, people say, well, somebody makes a comment to you about the, in your chat or in your theme, or, because we're all on social media now, right? And we believe all these people that we've never met, that we never know, that know nothing about us, but somehow they can say something to us and it affects us in a deep, hurting way. And just realizing that, first, that hurting people hurt people.
Yeah.
That's become a theme for probably the last 25, 30 years in my life is I understand that hurting people hurt people because it makes them feel better about themselves. And by doing that, I look for, well, what's making them hurt? And maybe I can help them solve that instead of taking on their pain.
Absolutely.
A lot of us take on that pain of that person. And I think that's part of even leadership. And you're talking about you're doing coaching, and maybe you can kind of talk about what does it mean to now transition, because we all have influence. It's just whether we're, like you said, whether we're following or whether we're influencing. And so how do we grow into being to see these things in people and being able to help them? Because, when I think about leadership, and maybe I could be wrong, I don't think about the guy who's your manager at work and is telling you what to do all day. That's not leadership. That's just, I got a position that I'm just telling you what to do all day.
Exactly.
But true leadership is, I want to help you grow. So how do you begin, as a coach and as a a person who meets even executives or other folks, how do you help people begin to see that it's not just I'm telling somebody what to do, because I've designated myself as your leader.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
know, a fine line to self-discovery is first off, you have to want it.
Yeah,
When it comes to,
that's good.
I guess I'll work backwards. It's like I, as a person who is no longer like, oh man, I'm trying to find the way to say this because it's a very complex process to start the process. Like I
Yeah.
can talk about the ABCD and like, okay, here's how you do the work. But it's you asked me a question of how do you like kind of get people to start doing the work or start wanting it. It's like, ooh, that's a tough one because it's almost like you have to find people that already want it. It's like for the
Mm,
baseball player, you have to find people that already have an interest in baseball. You can't force anybody to want to be a baseball player, but you can say, "Yeah, I like playing baseball. Hey, by the way, do you watch baseball? Do you like it? Would you ever want to go throw a ball around?" And then they might say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And that's kind of what I'll liken it to. But when it comes to creating leaders, there has to be a desire within the person that you're coaching. And you can coach without being a coach because no matter what you're doing, again, every relationship is a mirror. No matter what's going on, you have influence. You are influencing people every single day in what you do. If you and I got on this podcast and just argued for an hour, somebody in the listening, they would say, "Oh man, I see one side, I see the other." They'd be influenced, right? They might not enjoy a back and forth debate, but there are some podcasts that are like that. And so you and I are using our cadence and our tempo and the way that we articulate things to give a message in a certain way, whereas other people might want the message in a different way.
mhm.
So I am actually thinking a lot about breakthroughs and the idea of creating that in others. And I'm finding, slight spoiler, because I am trying to work on a book of this. So, but
Love
I'm
it.
finding it's when you feel safe, like you need psychological safety and then you need awareness. So what I come in and do as a coach is I create the safety. Like you and I right now, I feel comfortable talking with you. If I noticed something like, um, in something you had said that really challenged the worldview that I had, I might speak up and say, you know what, can we talk about what happened there? Or if you like talk over me in the podcast or something, I say, hey, afterwards, can we debrief? Because my experience as your guest wasn't ideal, which it's going great. So don't. That's just an example, just to be clear about it. I see. But, like
I love
if something had happened, the comfort of saying, okay, I feel psychologically safe. This person's not going to like bite my head off. That manager that just gives orders. Sometimes they're the type who's hurt. They have that idea of like, well, let's take for instance this toxic masculinity. Like, let's take that image and say, okay, it's the guy that wants to be the loudest and the biggest and the strongest. And so he never wants to be seen as weak. So he always wants to be giving the orders. Well, the moment that that's challenged, he puts you under his thumb, right? And that's the micromanager. So
it.
again, hurt people, right? So when you take that example, if you can create an environment where he feels psychologically safe to say, you know what, I really don't feel good when I yell at people. I say, yeah, I don't feel good when you yell at me. So now they have the safety, and I've just created awareness. And then it's up to them. It's entirely up to them to say, you know what, I want to change. So likening that to personal training, once again, personal training for the heart is kind of like what we do. Is if I said, well, I want to get really strong, I want to work on my cardio, so I want to run constantly. And you say, okay, do you notice that you're running only until you break a sweat and then you stop? And I go, oh, yeah. So you have the psychological safety to tell somebody your goal, and then you have the trust between you and that person to where they can basically say, hey, do you notice you're not really doing what you said you wanted to do? And that's the awareness of, you know what, you're right. I'm actually not working out to push my heart. I'm just working up to break a sweat. I'm burning some calories and that's it. But I'm not going to run a marathon if I don't push myself. And so, one final example I say is if your breath stinks, right? We all have that friend who'll turn and say, hey, here's a stick of gum, being really subtle. Others that will say, hey man, I'm just gonna be honest with you, your breath kind of stinks. And others who will just sit there and deal with it. All three of those are valid in the sense of being a human being. that's either, it's the same fight or flight. You're moving towards in a like a fight manner, like, hey man, your breath stinks, change it. You're moving in a delicate manner, almost tiptoeing around it, like, protective almost, like, hey, I'd like you to change something, but I don't really want to call it out because I don't want to get in a conflict with you, kind of conflict avoidant. And then others who just completely avoid it. Like, I'm just gonna deal with this and then just not hang out with the guy again. Right. And so all those are still ways of being a human being, but which of those ways is most in tune with who you want to be? And understand that different people will be at different levels of psychological safety for you. You'll trust different types of people less or more, and different people will trust you at different levels as well. And so when it comes to developing a leader, it is, if I am your coach, the first 2 or 3 sessions really is getting to know each other. The first session is an intake where I sit there and I just listen to your story. Tell me who you are. Tell me what you like. What are some moments that you're willing to share and be a little vulnerable? And then I'll do the same. I did on this podcast. Hey, I'm a lonely little boy that wants connection. That's who I am. So will you let me connect with you? Will you tell me a pain that you have and let me just sit in it with you? I'm not going to shame you for telling me. And that builds that safety and that psychological safety and that trust. From there, I will say, okay, what's your goal? Well, I want to be better at listening. Okay. 2 or 3 sessions later, if we're talking and we're getting into a good flow, and I'm telling you something that I'm really passionate about or an interest, or we're exploring something, and you're constantly interrupting, and I say, hey, can we take a pause for a moment? One of your goals is listening more. Can we talk about what's happening right now? So how do you feel? You feel comfortable? I'm like, okay, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Can we talk about that? And so we'll then explore that together of what's the belief. And it's like, well, I'm really excited and I want to share this with you. Okay. Well, I'm really excited that you're doing that. I'd also like to get my thought out. Could I finish the thought first and then give you your turn? It's like, yes, absolutely. And so it's like, can we try a tool of writing a note down of like, I'm going to let this person finish, but I want to say this, because they say, well, if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget it or something. So there's always some type of belief and you get to explore it together. But because we have that safety and that trust, we can then build awareness and tools around it. So to go all the way back to your original question, how do you build leaders? You don't. I get to walk a journey of people building themselves, but I find people that want to grow and become leaders. And that doesn't mean the people that give orders. It's the people that are centered enough to then help others center themselves and find that inner peace and go on that same journey using their individual story. Because the way that I connect with my clients is I own my story and I help you build yours and grow. And then you find your story and you build it and grow and you help somebody else do the same. That's how we change the world.
Yeah. Wow. It's always like, yeah, you're blowing my mind here on some of the things you're saying, because I'm just really, you know, I'm thinking about leadership, right? And I'm thinking about, first thing you're saying is you need to go find people who are looking for the thing you're doing, not to go change people who don't want to be changed. Right?
Exactly.
So many of us try to go out there, well, because I got the answer, you need what I have, so I'm going to
Mhm.
change you because you need to be changed. And no, we're looking for people who want. And then when you start talking about, you know, coaching, or just, the type of leader somebody is, and then you use your stick of gum and you're, tell a bad breath example, and I'm thinking, well, as a leader you almost have to listen to the people. Well, you have to listen because you talk about listening, but you have to know the people that are following you, because if you don't, if I'm telling somebody that your breath stinks, and that could do harm to them if I'm leading them in that direction, right? So I have
Exactly.
to listen to that person and say, because I could be that leader, right? And we all know that leader who just says it bluntly. They say it there, and then
The
they hurt.
people, I always say, the people that are brutally honest, but they're more interested in being brutal than honest. So
Yes. Oh, I love that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's more interested in me, because that's how I'm going. That's how I'm going to lead my
Mhm.
team. And then they wonder why they don't have a team that's loyal to them, that will
Absolutely.
do whatever they want to do for them. Because
And I will say once again, no judgment, because there are, militant individuals, a lot of construction, again, and I am pulling out some stereotypes, but again, that like masculine, manly man who says, well, if I yell with you and you yell back at me, awesome. We're soldiers right now. We're buckling down. We're doing it. And that's their language, but also understanding and like coaching, meeting somebody where they are. Like what you just said is you need to be able to tune into others enough to say, you know what? I see similar pain in you, or something like that. So those militant leaders that are able to say, you know what, yeah, let's go, being very, I believe it's autocratic, I believe it is, very like go go go, very let's do it, very task oriented. That resonates with a lot of people. So that there is a place for that. It's when you get the that type of individual and go into like a more sensitive area. I hear very much with leaders these days talking about Gen Z or Gen Z, sorry, being very like, oh, they don't want to work and all that. And I say, listen, they're motivated by different things. A couple things is, first off, they're motivated by different things. They're in a different world that has social media. And lastly, what were you like when you were 20 years old? Let me tell you, you were not the best person to be around, right? You were probably equally annoying or, equally something immature. And so it's shifting that belief again. And so to cap this off, because I know we're running lower on time, if you are a leader that, I guess the main thing is, be willing to change in some way, shape, or form. If you're a leader who says, this is how I am, regardless, and I have no desire to change, then you are not somebody that I would coach. And that's not a diss. That's no negative. It's just that is not my people. I love changing. I love learning. I love exploring who I want to continue to become so I can show up better because I want to connect in a broad way. If you're a leader who says, you know what, I'm brutally honest and that's who I am, that's perfectly fine. Like there's nothing wrong with you to be that leader, but start seeking environments that specifically want that leadership. Start mentoring people that specifically use that leadership, and also understand that there will be people that don't resonate with that leadership. So then you will either find a co-leader, a manager, vice president, something like that, that is almost your opposite or can augment, can speak softer, or you will be able to, as a leader, grow and shift and say, you know what, I love being that, brutally honest person, but I know in this situation with this individual, I need to be softer. And that's where there's some discomfort. And there's where that belief can come in of, let's challenge that dysfunctional belief together, because I am a sensitive man, but I can still be assertive. And it's finding that way to kind of code shift that is the true, in my personal opinion, the true mark of a good leader is being able to adjust. It's not a chameleon, it's influencing in different ways and being able to understand the nuance of, this person needs tough love, this person needs patience while they flounder and figure it out themselves, and this person needs a subtle hint and then maybe a check-in 1 or 2 weeks later of, hey, did you pick up on that or no? So everybody responds differently. And so a good leader is somebody that can own their core self of, you know what, I'm more of a listener than a talker, but I know when I need to speak out, or I'm brutally honest, but I know when I need to listen, or when I need to soften my blows. So that's what we look for. But
Yeah, no, and it made me go full circle to the beginning of our conversation as you were going, because what I was thinking is, I there in our world of what we consider success, there are a lot of leaders who yell, scream, that kind of stuff that do it, and they're very successful money wise, or I don't know if they're successful happiness wise, because what I
different for everybody.
yeah, and people, you respect them because they're scared of them, not respect them because of the
Yeah.
person that they are, and I think their leadership plateaus at some point. But
Mhm.
then I think they're a lonely boy who's wanting connection, right? That's
Absolutely.
exactly who they are, right? Whether you're soft spoken and you're trying to be a better leader, we're all seeking connection, and the way sometimes they get that connection is through, well, because I have influence on you, I have connection, and you have to do what I say, which
Absolutely.
and like I said, you got to find people who can work within that. Man, this has been really good. What Take some time though. I want you to, I know I didn't cover everything because we got into this deep discussion and you kind of coached me while we were here. So I didn't
Thank
get the opportunity to let you kind of talk about some of the things you wanted to. But what are some of those things that, or at least one or two things that we didn't get to talk about that you want to make sure everybody who's listening gets in?
Honestly, we spoke about a lot of it because honestly, all roads lead to truth. Like, no
Mhm.
matter what we talk about, there's an aspect of coaching there and there's an aspect of growth there. So no matter what we talked about, I mean, we always are going to find a way to say, you know what, it comes down to tune into yourself and grow. Like, do you want it? What do you want? And what
Yeah.
does that look like? And it's really just comes down to that. And so I guess as far as something that we get into is, one takeaway I would love to give everybody that listens here is one misconception I had about authenticity and being living with purpose, I felt like authenticity and being genuine to myself and like living with purpose meant being my whole self all the time, which meant forcing my goofy self into work or forcing my professional self into my friend group. And it was odd, being my whole self all the time. It just felt slightly misaligned. It was like trying to, fit a square peg in a round hole type situation, even though I knew that this was all like pieces of me that I loved. And so my phrase that I would say is, I used to think that being authentic meant being my whole self all the time. I now know that being authentic means having an outlet for all the facets of myself in my life. So I have my gym bro moment when I go to the gym and I want to lift a whole bunch, or I, go really be a very obnoxiously fit person of, oh, I'm going to go run this race. I'm going to do this obstacle course. Um, I have my goofiness when I'm with my personal friends. I have my soft-spoken professional nature when I'm at work, but we slip back and forth because you do like your coworkers, and I have moments of silent kind of caretaking with certain individuals. I have, listening more with clients, and then sometimes a moment of brutal honesty that is welcomed, and so I would think about that concept of the environments that you're in and also the pieces of yourself, because you may be trying to force pieces of yourself in the situations that they're not as aligned, and so there may be outlets for certain parts of yourself. But of course that was my journey. Maybe something else in this hour has resonated with you as a listener, but that would be my main takeaway: is find outlets for every piece of yourself. And then if you don't know what pieces you've got, sit with yourself, tune into yourself, and find out what the pieces of your life and your soul look like. Are you a creative? Are you a musical person? Are you a dancer? Are you, a skater? Are you a risk taker? All these different things. Who are you? And then who do you want to be? And then what does that look like? And then where are the places that each of the pieces of that person are welcomed? And that's how you craft an incredible life.
Wow, because I can see being frustrated based on what you said if you're trying to be your whole self all the time because you can't be, right?
Mhm.
And then how do you draw energy that feeds you? Because if there's an aspect of your life that you just love, like for me, when I get to go coach track and I get to coach athletes, and
Yeah,
I've been doing that for 38 years. There's a different Brian that shows up on the track field with young athletes that I'm influencing on how to do stuff, and I'm a totally different person. But if I try to bring that same person into a corporate speech or a corporate boardroom, I can't be that person because I'm not coaching young kids, right? But I can see I need to gain energy, but I also need to give energy. And
absolutely.
if I'm that authentic self and whatever I'm aligned with at that point, I can give the most of me. But if I'm
Mhm.
trying to be everything to all people all the time, I'm just, yeah, I'm discombobulated, I guess is my
Absolutely. And bringing that same thought, the final aspect is, we talk about authenticity and all these like energy giving or energy taking
Mhm.
situations of like fueling your soul. Also understand that recharge looks different for every person too. That's a whole other conversation. So let's not open it too much. But if anybody's interested in talking about that, you can contact me on LinkedIn or our site, integratedleader.com, if you have a business that you want to look into this with. But recharge, that will end you with, recharge looks different because some people recharge through socializing and feeling connection. Others want to sit and read in silence. So understand that part of authenticity is also knowing what fuels your cup and having an outlet for it that is not dependent on external circumstances. So if you feel best in the summertime because you've got a bunch of sunshine, that's fantastic. It's not going to help as much in the winter when the sun's not out. If you like hiking and biking, well, it's going to be hard to do that in winter because it's going to be damn cold, right? And so thinking, well, how can I get my fix of, maybe you love running or just basking in the sun? Maybe you always plan a winter vacation, or you have a sunroom, or maybe you throw on some beach music, put on a whole bunch of warm clothes, and just hang out on the floor in your house and stare up at your beach motif ceiling fan or something, right? But come up with something that you can always come back to, because then that gives you the energy and capacity to do this really, really emotionally and cognitively hard work that is seeking your authenticity. Because it's hard work. A lot of people say, well, I want the things I want, but I'm busy working 10 jobs and I've got 5 kids and all these different things. I understand. You have to work with your schedule. So take a moment and think, what recharges you? give yourself some capacity, then start thinking about, okay, who do I want to be? Because it is draining. It's almost like a job search. You got to have, it's almost a full-time job, right? So
Yep.
give yourself the ability to have that capacity. But once again, if you're looking for coaching, and I think we are heading to the end of the recording, so I'll give my little snippet here. But if you are looking for coaching or you want to just have a free one-on-one conversation, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to meet new people and just connect. Again, that's who I am, right? Lonely little boy that wants connections of all sorts and never know who you're going to resonate or what's going to lead to what. So let's go ahead and explore life together.
Wow. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being part of today. I grew so much, and so hopefully the
Thank
folks
you.
that are listening and watching, go back and watch it again. Take some incredible notes because you can be that person that you are longing to be. It might just take a few tweaks, but sometimes we can't see those things that are things that we can do because we've been living in our own bodies, we've been living in our own space, and we don't know how to do stuff we don't know how to do, right? And so,
Absolutely.
I always say a coach that doesn't even, a coach that doesn't have a coach shouldn't be coaching, right?
Yep.
Because, you just shouldn't, right? Because you really can't feed into people. And so, like I said, listen to this again, go ahead and hit subscribe, hit the notification, whatever those buttons are, because all of the interviews that I'm doing are meant to help you find your purpose by understanding how other people found theirs. And so, and the things that they're doing to be successful, because if success leaves clues, those are some clues you should probably want to pick up. And so,
Absolutely.
you guys have an amazing, awesome, incredible day today. I say, don't forget that you are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. And I can't wait to talk to you on the next one. Aaron, I want to have you back at some point because I want to talk about recharging. So,
all right, let's do it.
I love it. So you guys have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you on the next one.